welcome to the latest episode of the Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast. My name is Hunter Baumgardt, your host. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at HunterBOnAir. Feel free to like the Facebook page as well, Hunter Baumgardt Sports. Remember, you can watch or listen to the podcast, whatever is easiest for you. Simply search Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast, and feel free to subscribe as well. Well, today we have a really fun interview planned. I'm excited for this. Jon Arias is going to join us. He is the voice of the Badgers women's basketball team and the voice of the volleyball team at Wisconsin. He is also a co-host and producer on the Mike Heller Show in Madison on 1070 The Game, and also is a part of the Amon Green Gamers Lounge podcast. So he has a bunch of roles, and we're going to talk to him about a bunch of them here today. And he was also featured on the Dan Patrick Show for his rapping abilities. So stay tuned. We're going to talk to him about that, plus sports topics, his career, a bunch of different stuff, with a really fun guy to talk to in Jon Arias. So with no further ado, let's get to Jon Arias. Joining us on the Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast, super excited to have Jon Arias. He is the Badgers women's basketball play-by-play man, along with the Badgers volleyball team as well. He also is a host of the Amon Green Gamers podcast and a producer and co-host of the Mike Heller Show, 3 to 6 on the big or on 1070 The Game in Madison. Jon, thanks so much for joining me this morning. Really appreciate it.
It's nice to be here. Thanks for having me, Hunter.
Yeah, no problem at all. So wanted to get into a bunch of things today. Obviously, we'll get to some sports topics, as it looks like a lot of sports are coming back here in July, hopefully, crossing our fingers. But wanted to first just kind of ask you how you've been doing during this pandemic. Obviously, it's been different for everybody. Some people have obviously lost jobs, unfortunately. Some people have been working from home. What's kind of been your story during the last 3 to 4 months?
I've been very fortunate to keep my job, and it's been a little chaotic up until June 10th. So I have a 7-year-old whose school got moved to online learning, and so there was a point there from mid-March or so all the way up until June 10th where I would do half at home, half at work kind of deal, but still working at home during that first half and trying to help guide a first grader along on her first grade journey, I guess. And I learned a lot about bees and learned a lot about the life cycle of a butterfly and things like that. It was actually kind of cool. But then once June 10th came, I kind of went back to work full time. But I've been going into work. We've been doing our daily show from 3 to 6. And that thing's still been trucking along with no sports.
Yeah, that's awesome. Have you been kind of, as far as focusing on topics go, I've been hearing a lot from different sports radio personalities that it's like, I thought I was going to do more like wacky things or like out of the ordinary or talk about relationships or different stuff like that. Have you kind of been able to though focus on sports because there's been like when are they going to come back? And of course these baseball negotiations and everything, is that you still been able to focus on sports on your show?
Yeah, we have, but at the same time, what we did early on, and not so much now that the conversation is shifting toward baseball starting in late July, NBA in the bubble, and that kind of thing. We kind of tried to start focusing a little bit more on like, how is the DH going to affect the Brewers? What are the things you'll be looking for? What kind of impact will a 4.5-month layoff have with Giannis and the Bucks? So we kind of switched to those topics, but early on, probably from March, April, May, and even a little bit into June, what we tried to do is we use this as an opportunity to book guests longer for extended conversations. So on a normal show, we'll have, for example, Greg Gard, the Badger coach, on for a segment, and we'll talk about this, the game, a player or whatever. But we've been able to bring him on for 2 or 3 segments, and we've been able to talk more than just obviously current basketball stuff. We ask him about coaching. We ask him about how we got into coaching. We ask him all these different topics, and we're able to go a little bit, deeper with our conversation. So I'd say probably for the first 2 months, we tried to get on like one guest a day for either 30 minutes to 45 minutes to an hour, as long as they could do it. And we just kind of just sat down and we ignored, there's only so much you could say as like, what's it going to be like with no fans in the stands? When will sports come back? Blah, blah, blah. So we kind of used that opportunity to sit down and kind of have longer form conversations, which I really liked. And I hope that we're able to on some down periods in sports. Now, believe me, the fall is going to be chaotic because there won't be any down period. In fact, everything will be going down at once. But hopefully down the road when things get back to normal, we can use that and maybe book a guest and talk to them for 30 minutes as opposed to a 12-minute interview.
Yeah, I really like that. You can go really a lot more in depth with each topic and kind of get to know the people a little more, not just go subject to subject to subject or topic to topic.
Exactly, because we got like 5 minutes left in the interview. We still have to talk
Yeah.
about this and that. We got 25 minutes left in the interview. We'll get to that. Let's talk a little bit more about you. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. I love that idea. Jon Arias joining us here on the Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast. I am curious on your other roles here as far as the Badgers play-by-play goes for the women's basketball team and the volleyball team. You obviously are the voice of those two. Have you always wanted to do play-by-play, or is this an opportunity you kind of couldn't pass up, or both? Or what led you to these two roles with the Badgers?
I always wanted to play by play. In fact, that's if I had it my way, and an opportunity came where that's all I could do, I think I would jump at that opportunity. I went to Winona State, in southeastern Minnesota, and started doing play by play for Winona State football and basketball. And the radio station there needed a sports director, and I was the only one that applied. And so when I applied and got the job, obviously, I was like, oh, so I can be the guy. Okay, and I get to schedule the games. Oh, this is cool. So I was able to, kind of get a passion for it that way. And then, doing high school stuff when I worked in lacrosse. And then I got the opportunity to come to Madison, and I've been doing volleyball since 2008. And women's basketball a few years after that. I think it's 2012 I started my first year with women's basketball. And yeah, I mean, I love it. I love doing play-by-play. It's what I kind of got into radio really enjoying the most. Don't get me wrong, talking about sports for 3 hours is a pretty cool gig too, talking about video games on the Amon Green Gamers Lounge is pretty cool as well. I enjoy that thoroughly too, but play-by-play has always been my biggest passion. And so I love being able to call women's basketball games and volleyball matches. It's been awesome.
When people think about play-by-play, a lot of times, obviously, they think of the big sports, football, basketball, baseball. What's calling a volleyball game like?
I think it's crazy, man. It is so super fast. The first time I did it in 2000, well, actually, I had called a match in 2007 because we had some select matches on the air. And then we went full-time in 2008 with broadcasting volleyball. And I remember the first time I did it, I'm like, okay, I'm going to be the voice. We're going to do 30 games this year or whatever. And after that first match, I was like, well, that was awful because I couldn't keep up with the pace, just the terminology, like learning the terminology, digs and sets and attacks and kills and hitting percentage and you name it. I was like still a little iffy on all what that was, but it's really fast. It's crazy. And you're going to miss something sometimes, and you just have to miss it and move on and not even think about it again, because if you do, it went back and forth a couple of times already on each side of the net. It's really fast, but I enjoy it. I enjoy trying to keep up with the action. I enjoy trying to find new ways to describe an attack, which is old school terminology, a spike, but they don't really use that in the game of volleyball. It's more of like an elementary school type of term. So I enjoy trying to just come up with new ways to say, attack throughout the course of a rally or something like that. It's really, really fun. I enjoy it a lot.
It sounds like a good challenge almost, right? Because it's so different. And no, that's very cool, especially since you got to do, football and basketball in college and then kind of transfer to a different sport as well.
Well, what I like about it too, and basketball is similar, but it's obviously not quite as fast paced, is like if I ever called a baseball game, I would be panicking about filling the time because there's a pitch and then there's 30 seconds of no action. In volleyball, there's 30 seconds of action and then you got 10 seconds to take a breath before the next serve, and I like that it's action, action, action. I mean, there is basically no time to think, which I think is a good thing for me sometimes, like with a baseball game or something like that. I think I'd be okay with football because with football, you get to dissect every play. But yeah, it's fun. I like the hectic pace, and basketball kind of has that too. Obviously there's some timeouts and things like that, or free throw line where the play will slow down, but I like having action to call constantly.
Yeah, no, I agree. I've loved doing basketball here in lacrosse as well. Jon Arias joining us, voice of the Badgers women's basketball team and volleyball team. You can follow him on Twitter at Jon Arias Radio. So I'm curious, obviously you've been to many sporting events covering the Badgers for, the women's basketball team games and women's volleyball. I'm curious as well, and I always like to ask people who cover sports this question because at heart we're all sports fans. So what is it like, or has there been a moment in your career that you can think of, whether you're working a game or maybe even hosting or producing a show when major news breaks or something like that, you're like, oh my gosh, this is just so cool to be at this stadium or be in the studio while this news is breaking, or just a moment you sat back and thought, wow, this is why I chose this career?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. As far as attending like a Badger event,
Mm-hmm.
um, I would have to say the Final Four
Mm.
when the Badgers beat Kentucky and then ultimately fell to Duke. We were fortunate to, through our relationship with Westwood One Radio, send myself and Mike Heller, do the
Oh,
show
great.
with, to Indy, and we were able to follow the Badgers there. Like, that's the biggest moment in Wisconsin men's basketball history.
Yeah.
And they had, Frank Kaminsky, Sam Decker, the whole crew,
Mm-hmm.
and they had like a legitimate shot to be the best team that year. And the second half, well, we don't have to talk about the second half versus Duke and the officials. We could, but we don't have to.
We don't have
But
to get into that.
there were moments there. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm watching Wisconsin take down undefeated Kentucky. Like, it's happening right now.
Yeah.
And they are going to play for a national championship. And for many Badger fans to think that Wisconsin was in that game, like,
Mm-hmm.
that's a lifelong deal as a Badger fan. You may never, ever get that opportunity again. And hopefully with Greg Gard, they will. But just to be able, I think I'd have to say, going to the Final Four and watching the national championship for men's basketball, being able to be part of that was awesome. Breaking news. I can't think of, we've been on the air. Don't get me wrong. We've been on the air before where something major in the
Mm-hmm.
state is broken or something like that. I know the one conversation, it wasn't really, it was breaking news, but then it was news for like a month or whatever, was
Sure.
Brett Favre, that the departure from the Packers.
Mm.
That might have been the golden age of sports talk radio. Like all you have to do is turn on the mic and go, Brett Favre, and boom, phone lines light up. Boom, 3 hours filled. No, easy. Just
Wow.
Brett Favre pack. Like, that was amazing to be able to be part of that storyline. And it's funny because there are still times, like, we'll be talking about something else. We'll maybe ask the question, do you think Aaron Rodgers will finish his career Packer?
Mm-hmm.
And we go back to 2008, I think it was, with Brett Favre and the Pack. There are so many times throughout the course of the show, not even Aaron Rodgers related, but it'll just come up. We'll be like, it's kind of like when Brett Favre left the Packers, and we'll
Right.
reminisce for like 10 minutes. It's crazy how much of an impact that story still resonates in some of the things we talk about today. It's crazy.
Yeah, for sure. Well, no, those are two great examples. And obviously being at a Final Four, especially at any Final Four, but much less the Badgers being in the Final Four. I remember watching that obviously at home, and it was just fantastic. But to be there, I bet was, incredibly exciting, obviously.
It was. And even with my time with volleyball, I've been to two
Mm-hmm.
national championship
Yeah.
matches that they've fallen just short here over the last, half a decade or whatever. And just being part of that has been, it's so I can't begin to tell you how nervous I get, because you get to know the people, the staff,
Yeah.
the coaches, the players, and you know how hard they work.
Yeah.
And like, this is it. This is their moment. You may be a senior. You will never have this opportunity again. And as a broadcaster, I'm like, I feel like nervous for them. Now, obviously, they're athletes, and they probably know how to handle a lot of that pressure because they're just playing a game. But even the two volleyball national championships and Final Fours, been fortunate to cover too, has been so awesome.
Yeah, no, I get that feeling. I've having done sports here at UW Lacrosse, and their men's basketball team and their women's basketball team, but I've covered the men's the last 2 years, and this last year they really made a push at the end to make the tournament. And yeah, you do get nervous for them, even just sitting on the side. You can do nothing about it, and you just have to call the game. But you get almost maybe more nervous than they do, just because you don't have any control over it.
Yeah, I think you're right, man. It is so nerve-wracking, and but you're right. We probably get more nervous than the players do.
Yeah, I think so. I do want to shift a little bit to just some. Well, actually, let's go into this because I saw this on your Twitter account, and I'm very
Uh-oh.
curious about this.
Uh-oh.
This is your pinned tweet on your Twitter
I think I
account.
know where you're
So,
going. Okay, yep.
yep. So I am curious. It looks like you were featured on the Dan Patrick Show in 2018 for your
Yep.
rapping abilities. So
Oh,
tell me about that story because I'm very curious about this.
okay. So you get a lot of, I'm taking it way back here, Hunter. Okay, so
Okay.
I'm sure you, like everybody else, get a lot of spam calls, right?
Yeah.
Right. So I was so upset with all my spam calls that I wrote a rap that I would recite to the spammers just to waste their time. Kind of like, and I ended with like, please do not put, or please place me on that do not call,
Okay.
something like that, just to entertain myself. And I told that to Mike one day. He's like, wait, you rap to random spam calls on your phone? I'm like, yeah, it just entertains me. I don't know. He's like, you got to rap that. I was like, no, I don't want to rap that. Are you kidding me? And then he made me do it live, like with a beat off YouTube. And I was like, oh my gosh, I
Oh
don't
my
know
God.
what I'm doing. And it
Yeah.
worked out pretty well. And a sponsor was listening, and they decided to sponsor me doing what we call the weekly wrap-ups on the show. So I'd wrap up the week of sports, whatever
Yeah.
rhymes with Brewers or Yelich or, Badgers. You just kind of go through the week storylines and what happened in a wrap. And then the Dan Patrick Show had their Meat Friday deal. I don't know if you're familiar with Dan Patrick Show. They
A
grill
little
out in
bit.
their
Yeah.
Traeger grills. And then they
Yep.
all of a sudden had people sending in songs, like parody songs about meat.
Mm.
And so this was in the time when I was rapping on the show once a week. And I was like, you know what? I can rap about meat. Why not? And so I did the Lose Yourself by Eminem. And then I wrote it around the show because I'm so familiar with the show because I'm a fan of the Dan Patrick Show. We've been fortunate, Mike and I, to fill in on the Dan Patrick Show nationally. So, I know the guys there too. And so I wrote the rap, and it made their Sweet 16. They did a March Madness style tournament, and then it got all the way to the Final Fork. And yeah, and so it's just a rap about the Dan Patrick Show and meat and Traeger grills set to Eminem's Lose Yourself. And so, yes, that's how I got rapping on the Dan Patrick Show.
I love it. I saw that video and I was like, I want to know the story behind it. But I'm glad it was, you had a lot of practice then on the air of rapping before you did it for the Dan Patrick
Yeah,
Show.
and all those raps, there was only one live. There's no way I will rap live. There was only one live rap. The rest I would work throughout the course of the week, and it got crazy. Like, you know how hard it is to try to figure out how to rhyme 60 seconds worth of content when you're not you're not a rapper or you're not into music. And then not only write it, rhyme it, make it make sense, find a beat, then make sure it fits on the beat, produce the beat, produce the rap, put it together. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like a full-time job for 60 seconds of rap. So I haven't rapped anymore, but yes, that is how I pinned that tweet. I leave it up there because I think it's cool. I don't know. I liked being on the Dan Patrick Show. Yeah, that's awesome.
No,
And they seem to
exactly.
enjoy it too. So yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, it was a really fun video to watch, and it looked like the Danettes enjoyed it as well, and so did Dan. So that was exciting to watch. You mentioned there, and I want to ask you about that. So you and Mike, I think I've heard you on the Dan Patrick Show because we have a local affiliate here at WKTY. But so you and Mike fill in on the Dan Patrick Show. I didn't know that. What's that experience like?
Yeah, so it's the Rich Eisen Show and the Dan Patrick Show. We've been fortunate to do that. It hasn't been on the we haven't been on the Dan Patrick Show in a while, but it's really cool, and it's different, obviously, than doing a show in Wisconsin. You gotta actually talk about the national storylines and the Cowboys and the Lakers.
Yep.
And I think we were on once when Kevin Durant signed with the Warriors. We're either on the Rich Eisen Show or the Dan Patrick Show, and so it was fun to be able to be the first national voices for someone, throughout the country, for listeners throughout the country to give our opinion on Kevin Durant signing with the Golden State Warriors back in the day. And I think we've been on other times when kind of maybe less national news is broken, but we were on when the Olympics just this summer. USA Today first reported that the Olympics were going to be pushed back. So that was kind of fun to be on, to kind of break that news, because that's a big deal. But it's fun because you get to talk national. You you get some help with booking guests. So you get a little bit more of a national media, booking thing, and also like with athletes and things like that. So no, it's fun, and it's cool that they haven't said, they keep asking, I guess, is my point. Dan Patrick Show hasn't asked in a while, so maybe they should. But the Rich Eisen Show has, and it's hey, as long as they're cool with us doing it, I'm fortunate to be a part of it.
Yeah. How does that work? Because obviously, you guys are just in Wisconsin. So how did that come about? Did they like find out about you and then be like, wow, you guys could fill in for us, or how did that work?
So I think it spawned from the Dan Patrick Show. We launched the station in Milwaukee, sometime after 2011, I think, or something like that. And the Dan Patrick Show was part of that lineup. So we invited Dan and the Danettes to Milwaukee at a Buffalo Wild Wings. So they came out for that promotion. It was huge. Lines wrapped around the Buffalo Wild Wings. And then they ran in the sausage race at Miller Park later that day. But just the conversations there kind of picked up, and the connections through their team. And then that kind of then, at the time, I think Rich Eisen Show and Dan Patrick Show were both being booked through, I guess, for lack of a better term, through the same company and person. And then they're like, hey, what about the Rich Eisen Show? And so it all started because we invited them to Milwaukee, and they were kind enough to say, yeah, let's go to Milwaukee. That'll be awesome. Because, it's beer and sausage, and that's the kind of stuff they like. So, and so, so we booked them through there, and then just the connections we got through there was able to, spawn that, I guess.
Sure. No, that's a neat story. Jon Arias joining us, voice of the Badgers women's basketball team and volleyball team. Also, like he was mentioning, the co-host and producer with Mike Heller on the Mike Heller Show on 1070 The Game in Madison. So I do want to talk a little bit about sports going on. Let's just hit a couple topics quick. Obviously, baseball looks like it's coming back. I want to get your thoughts on this. What do you think of the 60-game season? Are you happy just to have baseball back? Would you have liked a longer season? Is it not really going to be valid because it's only 60 games? What are your thoughts?
So a couple of things here. I would have loved to have it been longer. Ever since COVID started, though, I said, you know what? If you can give me 50 games, if that's all they can give me, now that's under the presumption that you couldn't get in, not the back and forth negotiations are going to be the reason. I would have said, I don't care. I don't care. I understand everything is different in all aspects of life. So if I get 50 games, I think it's going to be fun. I'm going to embrace it. So I'm embracing the 60-game schedule, even though it got there because of negotiations or lack of negotiations maybe. But so I think of any of these COVID era sports, if that's what you want to label it as, baseball will have the biggest asterisk because it's a third of the season. It's nothing. I mean, the Washington Nationals started 19-31 last year and won the World Series. In the COVID season, they wouldn't even made the postseason. So you can't, whoever wins the World Series, I don't think the fans will recognize it as, the local fans will be like, hey, we won a World Series. The Brewers do it. Like, hey, we got a World Series. I don't care what you think. But nationally, I think there will be a huge asterisk like, hey, it's a 60-game season. I think people understand that. But I'm embracing it. And in fact, I think it's going to be awesome. I think every pitch matters. I think every decision matters. I think every game matters. And that is something that you really can't say through the course of 162, So every decision Craig Counsell from a Brewers perspective makes, every home run Josh Hader gives up, has, every strikeout Josh Hader gets, maybe I should switch it positive, is very impactful on whether or not you're going to be one of the 10 teams playing. And I think that is really exciting about this season. Even though none of us want 60 games, with 60 games, I think it's going to be super fun.
Do you think it benefits or hurts the Brewers more in a 60-game season?
I don't know. We were talking about whether or not once pitchers kind of get into a groove, because I don't know if 3 weeks is enough to get into the groove, but will teams with, bigger time pitching staffs than the Brewers or aces, the Brewers have their out-getters. I wonder, I don't know if it will. I would think it might. I know this, we talked to Tom Hoddercourt, who covers the Brewers for JS Online. and he says the DH rule is obviously going to benefit the Brewers.
Yeah.
You put Ryan Braun in the DH, and he still can swing a bat.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it might extend his Brewers career a little bit here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that is an interesting aspect, is the DH, and I think that'll benefit the Brewers. And the pitching is the biggest thing. I don't know if more teams will say to their aces, hey, go out there and keep dealing. Like, we need every game we can.
Yeah.
And because you're not going to throw as many innings this year. So go out there, and we're gonna keep you out there a little longer, while the Brewers are still doing their out-getter philosophy. I'm not sure, but I think from a DH perspective, it'll help the Brewers. And I think just overall from there are some teams you could probably rule out, but it's up for grabs. It's anyone's title this year.
Yeah.
I think just from that perspective, it helps the Brewers too.
As far as the NBA goes, obviously everybody was Bucks crazy as they were going through their season and getting the record that they have. But now they've taken, obviously, it'll be 4 months until they get back out onto the court. Do you still see them as a front runner for an NBA title, or do you think a different team comes to mind now that they've taken so many months off?
That's the great unknown, right? I mean,
yeah.
I would think that if you're the Bucks or the Lakers or the Clippers, you're still going to be good.
Mm-hmm.
I do wonder how health can impact a team like, say, the 76ers.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how 4.5 months impacts a guy like LeBron, who plays so many minutes. Now he got a rest.
Mm-hmm.
Is that more impactful than a guy like Giannis, who's young and still has legs? But he got rest too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is basically an off season.
Yeah.
An off season's worth of time. And the one thing I do wonder about is not necessarily will like a 4 or 5 seed win the whole thing, but will there be, I'll just say the Heat, for example, will there be a team that maybe has a more impactful postseason after a 4.5 month layoff than they would have if the season had continued? And part of the reason I say that is, you see teams from one year to another either, be worse than they were or be better than they were. Will that factor in? Will we see a team all of a sudden have these 4.5 months and be a better team? We see, in the game of college basketball, we see players get better from freshman to sophomore to junior. On the off seasons, they work on things. Now, obviously, this off season's been a little bit different, but will we see like rookies or second year players treat that as an off season and become more comfortable with the NBA game? Like, okay, I had my 60 game season or whatever I played. Now it's an off season. I'm more comfortable. I'm ready to go. And almost treat it like, their sophomore years or their junior years and be a better player and help their team in the post. I don't know. Basketball to me is the greatest unknown. Although overall, I do feel like it should be the same old teams, right? Because it is the NBA. It's like the 2 or 3 teams that can win it all. I guess I'd probably lean back to that's most likely to happen, but I do think there will be some other teams that maybe make a small run that would not have made that run.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point and something that I hadn't heard before this. And yeah, I think that's interesting whether these younger players are going to take a step up just by having that time off. Last question for you. Do you think there's an NFL season?
I do. Yeah.
Okay.
I think there's, I wonder, there's so many questions with the NFL. I wonder if they'll get to a point where maybe they have to suspend the season if a second wave hits. Like, do they say, think about it this way. We always talk about there's going to be COVID cases, right? In the NBA.
Yeah.
There already are. I mean, I don't know how many get through the bubble. There are going to be COVID cases in Major League Baseball. Mm-hmm. And now think about it. If there's a spike, like some suggest there could be, I won't say there will be, but there could be. And what if the position group of the Green Bay Packers, what if half the offensive line gets it?
Yeah.
And now they're out for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Or an entire wide receiving core. Like, what if this rips through the league and a couple, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 teams have significant waves where they're missing 4, 5, or 6 key contributors? Like, do you just play? You just play and you just bring up guys from the practice squad and Aaron Rodgers is throwing to, I don't even know who he'd be throwing to.
Like usual. He usually does anyway. But.
Exactly. I mean, I don't know how that works. I wonder if the league can make it through an entire season without maybe a little bit of a suspension here or there. Or do they, I should say, just treat it like, hey, this is going to happen. And we have protocols, and we move on, and we push forward, and we push through it. And sorry that you had 3 wide receivers out for 2 weeks, but the Cowboys had half their offensive line out for 2 weeks.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not sure, but I think overall they play. I think they play. Whether or not that gets halted at some point, I think that's a realistic possibility.
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating perspective, and I think it's going to be interesting how all of these sports deal with the positive cases, because they're, like you said, they're going to come. They already are. Jabari Parker has it. Malcolm Brogdon has it. I mean, these different players are going to have it. Other players on the teams are going to have it, and it's how you deal with those positive cases, I think, is going to be. Yeah.
By the way, talk about asterisks.
Yeah.
There could be one in the NBA, depending on if COVID slips through the bubble.
Yep.
I mean, imagine LeBron missing the finals and the Bucks winning 4 or something like that. You're not telling me the ESPN and the national media won't be all over that story with an asterisk? So there is that possibility, I guess, that a star player, especially in the NBA, where you're 1 of 5 on the court. God forbid, I don't even want to say the guy that we all know would be awful for the Bucks to get it, but geez, I can just imagine what that would do to the championship aspirations, man. It'd be awful.
Yeah. Exactly. It would be awful. But thanks so much for joining me. Again, he's Jon Arias, voice of the Badgers women's basketball and volleyball teams, and also works at 1070 The Game in Madison. Jon, really appreciate the time this morning, and hope to talk to you again soon.
Yeah, for sure. This was fun. Thanks for having me.
That's Jon Arias. He is the voice of the women's basketball team at Wisconsin, and also a voice of the Badgers volleyball team there as well. He's also co-host and producer on the Mike Heller Show, 3 to 6 Central Time on 1070 The Game in Madison. Also a part of the Mon Green Gamers Lounge podcast. So that's all of his roles. You can follow him on Twitter at Jon Arias Radio. That's Jon Arias Radio. And great follow. I'd highly suggest that. Really fun interview, really interesting topics as well, especially getting into the Dan Patrick Show and how he's a fill-in host, but also how he got on there with his rapping abilities. Also, some great points about the Bucks, Brewers, and the NFL. What if a position group all gets COVID? What happens then? How does the NFL deal with that? That was an interesting point. And, of course, him being at the Final Four and the Badgers beat Kentucky and his career up to this point. So it was a fantastic, fantastic conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Jon was super fun to talk to. So, hey, hope you all are doing okay, staying healthy, enjoying the summer weather that we've been having lately, and hopefully you've been enjoying that. So, with no further ado, I am going to bow out for this episode. However, remember, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at HunterBOnAir. And remember, I will always give any updates on the podcast there, so feel free to follow me. Also, feel free to like the Facebook page, Hunter Baumgardt Sports. Remember, you can watch or listen to the podcast. You can watch on YouTube or listen on SoundCloud. Simply search Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast. And feel free to subscribe as well. So, thanks for watching this week's episode. Talk to you soon, and as always, stay positive.